Wheelie. All right, we are live. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all in the internet so much for joining us tonight. My name is Rebecca Speas. I work at One More Page Books, and I am here today in this little virtual room with Eliza Knight, who is an award-winning and USA Today best-selling author of more than 50 sizzling historical romances. The sizzling is very important. And the books include the Highland Bound series, Pirates of Britannia, The Stolen Bride, and the Conquered Bride series. And also, last but not least, the Prince Charlie's Angels series, book one of which we're talking about today, which is The Rebel Wears Plaid, which is just brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today, Eliza.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And a few housekeeping notes just for the virtual event. Thank you to all of you joining us from home. Secondly, if you would like to purchase a copy of The Rebel Wears Plaid, we have signed book plates that Eliza was kind enough to send us that we are including in every purchase of the book. So I will drop those buy links and also links to Eliza's website and her social media in the comments for this video, which, depending on whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, will either be below or to the side. Everything is backwards on my computer. And also, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Eliza, go ahead and drop those in the comments as well. And I will bring them into the conversation. So, hooray, let's get started. First of all, Eliza, would you tell us just a little bit about The Rebel Wears Plaid? Just like the elevator pitch, if you will.
Alrighty. So The Rebel Wears Plaid is the first book in my Prince Charlie's Angels series. And I thought it would be a really interesting take to use some of the strong women of history who were immeasurable in their part during the Jacobite uprising and pair them with men who are equally patriotic to their cause. I got this idea actually when I was in Scotland and going through a museum, and there was some plaques about some of the women, and I was like, wow, you don't really ever hear so much about the women and what they did. And so I started doing some research and come to find out a lot of these women were seriously incredible, and also they lived afterwards. So I thought, well, this is kind of cool. Like, let's venture a little bit in. Let's make it into a romance. So my heroine Jenny is a highborn lady. Her brother is a powerful chief of his clan, but he has decided to side with the royal government against the Jacobites, going against their own people and everything that their father and grandfather and uncles and their entire clan has fought and died for, because they've been fighting. The first Jacobite uprising was 30 years before this. So she's like, what in the world, brother? This is crazy. And she decides to go against him in secret, of course, because she can't let him know that she's doing this behind his back, or else he will take revenge on her. And she wants to fulfill her family's legacy. So it started at a young age with her two best childhood friends. They make an oath to see that the rightful king is put back on the throne. And so as an adult, by day, she pretends to be a lady, and as her brother and others might expect her to be. But by night, she's out there raising an army, gathering weapons and coin and support for the prince when he finally does come back to Scottish soil. He's currently in exile. And then she's grown quite infamous doing this, and people call her Mistress J. While she's out on one of her missions, she runs into a very sexy Highlander who doesn't at first realize who she is. Yes, that guy right there. That is exactly what he looks like. So that hero is Torrin Fraser, and he's got a family that is kind of rife with backstabbers. His uncle is famous for jumping sides, and he was a real chief of his clan during that time and a noted spy for both sides. And the hero, Torrin, he's kind of back and forth whether or not he should belong to one side or the other. So he runs into her, and when he realizes who he's with, he thinks, my mother was murdered by a Jacobite rebel, a female, and he thinks that Jenny might actually be that culprit. So he's like, wow, she's asking me to join her rebellion. I need to seek revenge on her. this might be actually my shot to kind of get in with her and figure out how to dismantle this whole thing from the inside. And I don't want to give away any spoilers or anything like that, but it gets pretty heated from there on.
Yes, it does in more ways than one, without spoilers. Thank you so much for that breakdown. That was fabulous. I greatly enjoyed this book, but the first thing that like grabbed my attention was the series name. We have to talk about it. Prince Charlie's Angels is such a perfect series title.
Thank you.
I lost my mind when they told me what the series name was. But it refers to our first protagonist, Jenny, and her two friends.
Yeah.
Who I assume are the next two heroines.
They are.
And you write in your preface to this book, and also in you mentioned that there are all of these wonderful historical women that these angels were inspired by. And can you talk a little bit about maybe some of those specific historical women and how you discovered them?
Sure. So this book, Jenny, is based off of 3 different women that I kind of took pieces from to create a story, because I didn't want to write exactly a historical fiction, which I also do in another side of my writing, but I really wanted to write a romance. So I picked 3 different women, Lady Anne McIntosh, and who she resembles most because Lady Anne was also known as Colonel Anne. And in the book, a lot of Jenny's men call her Colonel Jenny. So, and then there was Jean Jenny Cameron and Lady Margaret Ogilvy. So these 3 women are really super fascinating. Lady Anne was actually married to someone who went against the Jacobites, and she was like, well, behind your back, I'm going to raise an army. That's ridiculous. And so she raises this army. She even fights with them, but she's not officially allowed, because she's a woman, to lead them in battle. So hence her men giving her the nickname Colonel Anne, sort of like as an unofficial, like, we know you're our leader, even though they won't let you be the official leader. And at one point, Prince Charles came to stay with her at her castle, Moy Hall. And the redcoats figured out that he was there, and they just started marching on the castle. Well, they didn't have a full load of soldiers there to take out this massive horde of dragoons that were coming down on them. So she devised this plan to send them out with a bunch of guns, make a ton of noise, hidden, so that when the dragoons marched on the hall, they thought they were actually coming face to face with the entire Jacobite army, and they and fled. So that may or may not have influenced something in the book. You'll have to find out. But I just thought that was so cool. Like, that is a real life person. And she was just super amazing. And another woman named Jenny Cameron, she was sort of the agent for her brother, John. He had a disability. And so a lot of times she would go out and talk with their people, go to different meetings with other clan chiefs and things like that, sort of being his mediator. And so she was in charge when their chief called for soldiers to be called up. She was in charge of going out and gathering the soldiers. And she was actually at Glenfinnan when the prince actually like raised his standard to say, like, we're doing this, I'm here, we're going for it. She was there for that. A lot of people, she's confused a lot with another woman who had the same Jean Cameron name, who was also a badass, but also a criminal.
I feel like that's another series.
Like, who is she? And the third lady is Lady Margaret Ogilvy. She refused to stay home, and she went with her husband, joined his army. She went on campaigns. She was a recruiting sergeant. And after being arrested by redcoats, she convinced a laundress to switch clothes with her, and she mimicked this woman's old gait to get away. So it's a lot of sort of this like subterfuge and just bravery and being willing to go out and raise troops and fight and join the campaign. Just really inspired me, because you don't, like I said earlier, like, you don't really see that a lot. Most of it is talks about like the Highlanders, which we all love that part too. Just to know that the women were fighting right alongside them and super brave. So I really wanted to make their stories come to life, but also give them that happy ever after too.
Yeah. I love badass historical ladies. Like, that's my jam.
Yeah, me too.
I'm so happy that this series exists. And you touched a little bit on something that I think you've been asked before, but I think is a really interesting conversation to have, is that if you know anything about the Jacobite rebellions, you know that they don't end happily.
Right.
Spoiler alert. It's been 300 years though, so like,
Yeah.
is it a spoiler? But romance is a genre that is so dependent on its happily ever afters.
Right.
And I was wondering if that was something that you, or that was in your mind as you set out to write this series. You know, how did you balance those two sort of seemingly opposing ideas?
Right. Yeah, it was definitely a challenge because we all know about the massacre at Culloden. Like, it was just a huge massacre. And then following that was a lot of violence against rebels and murder and all of that stuff. Totally depressing. And so one of the things I wanted to do, because I know that these women did live, and that even though there was all this crushing violence and depression and all of that afterwards, that some people did go on to have a happily ever after. So I was just basically trying to bring some hope to that era, which is so dark, and share their stories and bring them to life, and kind of, I guess, just mostly like hope and love, and bring all of that to the forefront of it. Even though we know there is the bad stuff, like there was good stuff too.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful thing that comes across in this book, even though we're not quite to that really tragic end at Culloden quite yet. But one of the things that I loved so much about this book is that the characters, they love very fiercely, even if it, you know, obviously Jenny and Torin ultimately find that happiness, but also what I loved most about them is their loyalty to their family, and that sort of like fierce dedication to the people that they feel responsible for. And I was hoping you might talk a little bit about that aspect of their relationship, because that's also the thing that I think leads to them sort of butting heads a lot in this book. And I really loved that dynamic between them. And I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about it.
Sure. So obviously they've kind of both grown up on opposite sides. Jenny's family has always been rebels, except for her brother, traitor.
Hamish.
Gosh,
Hamish.
why did you do that? And, Torin's kind of grown up back and forth. So his uncle is really sort of the leader of their family and mostly sides with the government most of the time. And then when he thinks that things might be better for him or he might gain something from it, might go back to the rebels. But for the most part, he's just kind of like a traitor. And so Torin's grown up in sort of like this, like, crazy family that he's not sure what side to be on. But even given that, he is fiercely loyal to his siblings. He really feels a strong connection to them and protecting them. And then also with what happened to his mother, you know, she was his sort of like guiding light, and she's taken from him in a violent way. And he, you know, has to figure out what has happened to her, and who cares about what's going on with his uncle at this point. Like, he's gonna find out what happened to his mother, and that's what's going to be like his ultimate, I don't know, revenge or whatnot. But,
retribution almost.
Yeah. And Jenny, like, she feels a fierce, I think even so much with her brother, like, even though he's a traitor, she still feels a connection to him, you know, because she doesn't ever want to actually just go attack him. Like, she's not going to take her army to go attack her brother's army. And she's fearful of that, of meeting him on the battlefield, because she knows ultimately in her heart, she's going to have to go with what she believes is right. And if that comes to head with her brother, then she knows which side she's going to choose. And that isn't, you know, that's heartbreaking for her. So that's something that she's really struggled with. But one of the things that I love so much about Scotland and clans is that they are all so tightly knit and family oriented, except for the and who knows what's going on with those guys. But I don't know, family is something that's really important to me. So I really wanted to sort of portray that in the books too, that family is tightly knit. And also that family isn't always bloodborne. To Jenny, her two BFFs, those are like her sisters in arms. And her cousin is her right-hand man. And, all the people in her clan, she thinks of them and the people in her army as her brothers. Like those are her family too. So I don't know. I just thought that was like something important to come across in the book so that just see like the love that everyone has for each other and what they're willing to give up for each other and for a cause. Just so noble.
Yeah. And I have a question from a lovely watcher, Sally, who is a great One More Page customer. Sally asks, how did you decide to align the loyalties of characters in historical conflict, so the Jacobite rebellions? How did you decide to align their loyalties where, from our perspective as modern readers, we have very complicated feelings about inherited monarchy versus independence and then loyalty to either of those things? Which I think, it's kind of hard reading these kinds of books from a modern perspective sometimes. Was that a thing that was on the forefront of your consciousness? I don't know. That sentence got away from me.
Sure. So that's the hardest part about writing historical, is to not sort of like put our own thoughts into it and really take myself back to what would they feel at that time. And I think for Scotland, for centuries, they'd been fighting to have it be their very own. And so while this Jacobite, rebellion wasn't necessarily always English versus Scottish, because like I said, there are some Scottish traders that are siding with the English government. And the countries had been supposedly united ever since Queen Elizabeth had died and her nephew inherited, who was Mary Queen of Scots' son. We could go on a whole tangent about that. But, so I think for Jenny and for her friends, the thing is that they were really trying to bring back the rightful king who should have been there from the very beginning. And instead, there had been a usurper who came in and took control because of, it was really very complicated. There's so many different things. Like, it was a religious thing, they didn't want to have a Catholic on the throne. They wanted to have a Protestant on the throne. And so that was a huge factor in not allowing Prince Charlie's father to be king, even though he was the rightful king. And one of the reasons that he had to leave or face death. And so, I don't know, it's just so complicated. So I guess the best thing I could say is that I have to put myself back in time and sort of like, if I were Jenny, how would I feel? My whole family's been fighting for the last 30 years and centuries before that, even probably because of all the upheaval in Scotland. And what would I want? Like, my dad died for this. My grandfather died for this. My uncles died for this. I'm going to die for this. And, she's surrounded by people that want to die for this too. Like, that's how they feel. Like, that's their king. And this is someone who just came in and took over for no reason, or for no reason that she thinks is a good reason. That answered the question. It's so complicated.
It was very complicated. And I think that there's also something in there, at least the thought experiment of like, what would have happened if the Jacobites had succeeded? Like, you can go down infinite rabbit holes with that one. And it really, like, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know if I personally believe in a monarchy, but I'm here with Jenny. Like, I'm here on the ground with Jenny. So here we are.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Jacobite rebellions, all three of them, are so fascinating historically. And that's kind of segues into my next question, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your first series that takes place in 18th century Scotland.
Yes.
Previously, there's a lot of medieval Scottish history involved, and there's some Tudor, like 16th century.
Yeah.
What drew you to this time period? Was it finding out about those women, or was it like, did you pick the Jacobites and then sort of discover that wellspring of awesome people?
It's kind of a few different things. One, for example, is when I was visiting Scotland with some friends and doing research on another book, I came across these women, and I was like totally floored. Like, why aren't we talking about these women? I want to do that. And at the same time, I was also working on a book of historical fiction called Ribbons of Scarlet, in which we were dealing with the French Revolution. So I kind of had revolution on the brain, and also that's a different time period, different country. The Scots and the French are kind of pretty intertwined throughout history. So I think that's probably mostly why, and also something different. So like you said, I've written over, I don't even know, 40 or 50 Scottish.
The bio said 50, so that's what I said.
So many. People ask me how many. I'm like, I have no idea. A lot. I've written a lot of medieval. So I really wanted to try a different time period. And I dabbled with possibly doing Regency, but I wanted to delve into something that was a little bit more challenging. So that was one of the reasons that I chose that time period.
Yeah. Did it change your research process at all? Like, were there, was it a little bit easier to research 18th century? No.
It was so much harder. Because
like there were 6 people who had the same name.
Right. Like they all have the same name. Their clothes are different. The whole government is different. Everything is like the land doesn't even look the same. So the research was quite extensive for that. And also because it's so well documented, I'm a huge history nerd, and I wouldn't be able to put anything out that wasn't like accurate. So I was like double, triple, quadruple checking everything. And it was definitely challenging but also really, really entertaining.
Yeah. I love asking historical authors this. Was there anything that you found in your research that you couldn't fit into the book for whatever reason? Like you wanted so much to make it, but it just like couldn't for story or whatever.
Yes. And actually I totally trolled myself, and you'll have to find it in one of like the little clue about it in one of the later books. So I went on like a whole day or two long binge on how to make beef jerky. And I wrote this whole scene where she's like making beef jerky for everyone. And I was writing it and I was like, man, this is really boring. Like, who is gonna want to read this scene? I'm going with it anyway though. And there's like a whole chapter on her making beef jerky. And so I get my edits back, and the editor's like, I think I could probably cut this. Like, trying really nicely to say, like, this is a terrible scene. And I just started laughing so hard because as I had been writing it, it was really terrible, but also so fascinating. I watched like documentaries on like how to like build like wood, like actually how to make it like in a medievalist way. And yeah, that's just interesting. Like, it has nothing really to do with the book or anything, but it's just sort of like a crazy tangent that sometimes we go on as historical authors that make no sense.
Those rabbit holes are very real though.
Yes,
like there's a guy on YouTube who's like a historical reenactor, and he was like makes historical like canoes and food, and I think it's like it's like Nutmeg Tavern or something, but I feel like he does make beef jerky at some point. So
it might have been him.
I don't know. That's delightful. I love those things because they're just little nuggets that you can just keep for yourself sometimes.
Watering. I'm laughing so hard about it. It was really ridiculous. Because, like, seriously, when I was writing it, I was like, this is terrible. I don't even know why I'm doing this, but I can't stop.
Okay, but hear me out, Eliza. The ghost pottery scene, but with beef jerky instead.
Right?
Counterpoint, editor.
Yes. Maybe I should put it up on my website, like deleted scenes.
Oh my God. Amazing. Sorry, I'm referencing my notes in case I totally forgot about anything. You sort of touched on this, but I think I wanted to ask just a little bit about your research process, because I too am a history nerd and I am fascinated. Are you the kind of writer who you do all of your research first and then you're like, okay, now I can write the book? Or do you just sort of like bang out a draft and you're like, I'll come back to the panniers later, or like whatever the candlesticks look like, we'll get that later?
So I'm really bad because I have to know everything. And when I get like sort of to that crunch time where I'm like not writing enough words and the deadline is looming, then I start putting in parentheses like fact check this, I just made this up, or I put in all caps like they looked at the I don't know what, fact check this later, something. So, but in the beginning, I am really hardcore about the research of where they are, where they're going. I know all the routes, all the maps, drawings of the castles, layouts of, garrisons, whatnot, the path they're taking. And I can't start writing until I know their names, and I have to make sure that their name matches who they are and their story and the history and all of that. So I can kind of get in my own way to even start the book. And then I'll stop like as I'm writing to look up different things. And like I said, like once I start getting to crunch time, I'm like, okay, you can look that up later. Like do that during your, your review, whatever, stop. You're taking up too much time. But for the most part in the beginning, I am really, really hardcore into the interrupting myself.
That's fabulous. A quick note in case you weren't here with us at the very beginning of the event. I have dropped buy links for Eliza Knight's new book, The Rebel Wears Plaid, into the comments. And we have signed book plates for those. So if you'd like to get your hands on a copy, go ahead and click that. I will also, while Eliza is answering the next question, I will insert all of her social media and her website and that kind of fun stuff. And also, if you have any questions for Eliza, about the Rebel Wears Plaid, about her writing, about Scottish history, drop them in the comments, and then I will bring them into the conversation. So, Eliza, what is coming next for Prince Charlie's Angels, if you can tell us?
The second book, Truly Madly Plaid, is going to be coming out in December.
Titles are so good, Eliza. They're so good.
And I had a lot of fun kind of matching the titles to the characters. So in the second book, it deals a lot about like madness. Like my hero thinks the heroine is literally mad because like the first time they met, she was ill. Like she had a fever and she went to attack him and he's like, whoa, you're crazy.
Whoa, bud.
So they deal a lot with that throughout the book, and it's really fun and entertaining. And her maid, who's sort of her companion, is a little bit mad too. So I really enjoyed writing that one. And that is Annie's book, her Jenny's BFF. She is a healer, and she has her own fun story. So that's exciting. And then the third book doesn't come out till next year. That's Fiona's story. And that one is You've Got Plaid. And the cool thing about that is she's based off of a postmistress. So she really was dealing with mail. So like the movie, like You've Got Mail, is like, oh my God, you've got plaid. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'm beside myself.
I had so much fun with the play on the titles and the fact that I could make them match so well with the heroines from that time period. So it was cool.
That's so delightful. Oh my goodness. And will we, I mean, spoiler alert, possibly. Feel free to say you can't say. Will Fiona's book bring us to the end of the rebellion, or maybe not? It will. Should we get tissues ready is really what I'm asking.
No, because it is a happily ever after.
There we go. Great.
There is hope. And that book, the third book, was actually the hardest to write because I was in the thick of a lot of things that didn't seem hopeful and trying to find the hope. One of my really good friends, who's another author, I was calling her like so much and being like, I don't know how to go on. There's no hope. She's like, you'll find the hope. You always do. So I was able to find the hope and a happily ever after for that. So you may need tissues anyway, but you'll also feel really good at the end.
That's good. I mean, I love a good cry so long as there's the hope at the end.
The uplift at the end. The hug.
The uplift at the end is key.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love so much about romance, is that, you know, no matter all of the trials and tribulations that you go through, you're always going to get that bit of hope at the end. And this is my next question is sort of a more, I guess, a more general question, but I like to ask all of our romance authors this question because I find the answer is fascinating. But my question is, what was the book that made you a romance reader or a writer, either one?
So probably the book that made me a romance reader, and it's really a classic, is Jane Eyre. I love Jane Eyre so much. I've read it like a million times. And I remember when I was in high school, I'd probably read it like a dozen times by senior year. And one of my friends had to write a paper on it, and she didn't know, like she didn't have time to read the book, and the paper was due. And I was like, listen, let's just sit down and chat. I will tell you the entire book right now. Like I'm your personal audiobook right now. And I think she got an A. It was a good grade, whatever it was. But that was
amazing.
Like I just loved that book. I actually read the Brontes before I read read Austen, and I fell in love with her. And then when I was visiting a grandparent who had a whole stash of romance novels hidden in the attic, I found Julie Garwood's The Bride. And that is what really got me hooked on Scottish romance. And I used to write like my own like fan fiction, I guess, for that in school and like pass it around to my friends. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. So I really did it for fun. And I didn't start writing for publication until it was like 2006. So that's a lot of math. Is that 14?
Math is hard, you know, some time ago.
So yeah, it was a while ago, and got my first contract in 2008, and that was a Scottish time travel. So,
love me a good Scottish time travel.
Me too.
It's funny. I read a few Scottish romances when I was very young. So like, I think and now I don't read as much until I read this one, and I was like, okay, am I just going to go back and read every Scottish romance that I own? Like maybe.
Come back to the dark side.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's my next question is like, what drew you to Scotland specifically? Like, was it, you know, because you read Julie Garwood's, you know, at a formative age, and that's was sort of what you started writing, or was it like, did you find your way to writing Scottish romances?
Well, like the first thing I started writing was actually a thriller, and that book will never, ever, ever. I may in one day write thriller because I actually do love thrillers so much, but that one was terrible. And I entered it into a Writer's Digest contest, and they told me how terrible it was, and they were right. But because I had always loved writing romance, I kind of had sort of like a romancy voice going on in my head, and having written the fan fiction just for fun, I was like, well, I'm already writing this kind of stuff for fun. What about trying to think about my own story? So I did do that, and I entered that. It was a short story, time travel, about 15,000 words. I think that's maybe 40 pages or something like that. And I won first place. So I was like, oh, I guess maybe I have a good thing going here, and it kind of all took off from there.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Are you reading anything now? Like, I know, you know, authors are always on deadline at some point, but have you read anything, romance or otherwise, that you really enjoyed this year?
Yeah. So like I said, I really love classics. So I did just recently read Rebecca for the first time.
Oh my gosh. It's so good.
It was so good. So good. In fact, I got a bunch of other friends to read it, and they loved it. And then I read a really horrible, depressing one, very well written, very depressing, called We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Is it Lionel Shriver? I think it's Lionel Shriver, yeah.
Wow, that made me like cry and want to go like drink a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So let's see, what else have I... Oh, I'm reading right now a really funny one. It's not a historical romance, but it's a contemporary romance. What is it called? It's sitting on my table, but I can tell you what it's about. It's These two
My
people,
bookseller senses are tingling. I might be able to tell you what it is.
they work together, and they're like rival secretaries or executive assistants for like this mega media company. And it's like a chick litty kind of book with a blue cover.
Is it The Hating Game? Are they?
Yes, that's what it is. I think that's
I'm looking over at our romance section, and I was like, blue cover, and that one has a blue spine, and I was like, aha.
that's what it is. It's really funny. I like that one. But most recently, I've been reading some friends' books that aren't published yet. So that's been exciting as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. We have a couple of comments. Amy B has already ordered the book, and
Yay.
she's so excited. So thank you, Amy B.
Thank you very much.
And I also always like to ask this question because it's very easy for me to be like, let me ask you questions about your book. And they're the questions that I sort of decide to ask. But is there anything about The Rebel Wears Plaid, which you can buy from us, One More Page Books, and we will send you a signed book plate. Is there anything about The Rebel Wears Plaid that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you, or that people haven't asked you about?
That's a really hard question.
It is. I'm sorry. If not, that's okay.
I can't, like, I'm trying to think.
I did put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it was it was a really good question. So we talked about the awesome badass women. Those are my favorite. We talked about the BFFs. I think friends and best friends are super important. And girl bonding and all of that. Oh, I guess I did forget to talk about earlier how I came up with the series title. You mentioned that, and then I went off on a tangent. So I could talk about that. That was super fun because I was like brainstorming, like I need a series, like I want to write this. What's a good series title? Because you want something catchy that's like exciting. And everyone's always doing these pitches like something meets something. And so I was like, okay, what could this be? Like, we've got Scotland, we've got badass chicks, and it just so happened I was watching my daughter. I have 3 daughters, and they all really love Charlie's Angels. So we were watching it, and I was like, wait a second, Prince Charlie, Bonnie Prince Charlie, Prince Charlie's Angels. And then it sort of like became serendipity because like as I'm like doing research, I find out that song, Come All You Faithful, the Christmas song, was actually like supposedly written as a call to arms for Prince Charlie's people to come up, and like they were come all you angels, like you are the rebels. That was like a euphemism for rebels, like get here and protect your prince. And I was like, whoa, this is the perfect thing because we've got 3 really awesome chicks, and we've got Prince Charlie, and so bam, Prince Charlie's Angels.
I am astounded at how perfect a title it is. Like, what a lightning bolt, like galaxy brain kind of moment.
That was what I was thinking. I was like, yes, perfect.
Oh, I love it. That sort of went through all of my questions. I think everyone is busy buying the book at the moment. But I am so happy to have chatted with you, Eliza. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
So checking my notes again. Thank you all at home for tuning in. Just a reminder that links to Eliza's website and her blogs and social media are in the comments, either here or here, depending if you're on Facebook or YouTube. It looks like one of them got a little wonky formatting, so I will do that after the fact. I will make them pretty again so that you can click through and find her. The buy link for The Rebel Wears Plaid, which is book 1 in Prince Charlie's Angels, is available from One More Page, and we have signed book plates. And yeah, that's all from us. Thank you so much, Eliza.
Thank you. This was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
I'm so glad. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.
Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
gonna end the broadcast now, hopefully successfully.